me again. I hope you're all well. Welcome back to my channel. So in my last video, I put up a poll asking you guys what you'd like to see next, whether it's a language video or an English video, and you guys decided you wanted to see an English video. So back with popular demand, I'm here with how to get a 9 in English. Now before we get started, don't forget to smash that subscribe button down below to keep up to date with all my videos because I post weekly. Now let's get on with the video. First things first, I'm going to be talking about English language. And as you guys know, I loved English language more than I loved English literature. I didn't really like English literature, but surprisingly in the exam I got an 8 in my language and a 9 in my English literature. So I'm going to tell you exactly how I did manage to get those grades. So I know a lot of you will be thinking, how can you revise for English language? That's just not possible. Well, my friends, that is wrong. You can revise for English language. I'm going to tell you how. So I'm going to talk about this book. Obviously it's CGP again. This book breaks down your exam board and the requirements that you need to tick off certain criteria. Here's a breakdown of everything that your examiner will look for. And also it tells you exactly how they want you to answer each question. So I know for AQA there's 5 parts, and it tells you exactly how you should be answering those questions. They've got example sources, warm-up questions, exam style questions as well. So this is really good if you just want to put as much practice in as you possibly can, and if you're a bit iffy on what exactly you need to include in your answers, this book is very good for that. But for me personally, even though I thought this book was very useful, I already knew my criteria of what I need to do and what my weaknesses were. So I personally thought that going online and printing off sources, regardless of exam board, although your exam board will help, I printed off practice questions, past papers, and I did them under time conditions probably once a week. Don't worry too much about time conditions at the start of year 11 or roughly this time. Towards like maybe the middle of the year, think about time conditions a bit more, but do the questions, take them into school, give them to your teachers and get your teachers to mark them. Then your teacher should give you feedback on what areas you did good and what areas you were weak at. The next weekend, print off another past paper or do the same one if you want to, but keep in mind those weaknesses that you did and try and adapt and enhance your techniques this time. And I know that is the thing that I thought worked best for me. That's literally all I did for English language. So yeah. So moving on to English literature. English literature was a huge nightmare for me. I think I've said this before, but I found memory-based subjects very hard. And as you know, in English literature, you've got to remember 3 books and 15 poems of your cluster. I really put in a lot of effort for English literature, but I hated it. One thing that I did, every school will probably do this, you go through each poem and you annotate them. And I would annotate mine so much in so many different colours, highlight the exact points, and you just have loads and loads of different annotations. I gave my anthology book into my school so they could use for the other year groups, but I would have shown you otherwise. And I just went off the annotations of my poetry book and I thought, okay, these are the best ones, I'm going to use them, go into my exam with that. And I got a 6 in my first set of mocks. So then in my second set of mocks, I knew that what I did in my last mock was wrong. It was really good annotations, but it was too much to absorb. It's just too much, right? So instead, what I did was I made notes on each individual poem. So, for example, neutral tones. We did relationships as our poetry cluster. So I would list the themes and some of the key themes. So loss of love, death of love, you know. And then I'd talk about language, structure and form. So for language, I did about 2-3 quotes. So for the quotes that I used, I did not just use a quote that I could analyse once. I'd use a quote that I could analyse multiple times, so 3 times in 3 different ways. And that shows my in-depth knowledge I have about this extract. So for example, the metaphor rings with wrongs. I talked about it emphasises a narrator's belief that relationships are fraught with injustice. And then I talked about the alliteration. And then I talked about rings, twisting and implying twisted pain, and I talked about the alliteration of the letter R. So, and how that covers up for his deep wounded melancholic pain. And then I talked about the alliteration W, which is grief and sobbing, like when you wail, it sounds like a W, do you know what I mean? So in one quote, I analysed that 4 or 5 times, and that's why I'm saying I think just use 2-3 key quotes per poem, analyse them in depth. The same thing I did for structure and form, different things you can talk about for one quote. And then I just talked about what you can compare the poem with. So you can compare this poem with One Flesh in terms of decline in a relationship, or if you had the topic of significant moments, then talk about She Walks in Beauty. You can compare it to that. This is exactly how I know, this is how I got a 9, because this is exactly what I did. I memorised the 3 quotes per poem. Don't forget context. Context is very important, but don't just shove it in as a different paragraph. Try and like interlink it into your points you make. And one of the key things that my teacher always told me was be more concise, because I would go waffling. So with this structure that I did, it was a lot more to the point. I did the exact same thing for every poem. Also for poetry, I would definitely recommend you have a look at Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor's channel is very good. That's where I got most of my notes and my analysis from for my anthology. He was really good in terms of the language you should use. There were types of phrases that I made a list of and I would repeatedly use in all of my extracts, not just for literature but also for language. And if I had other essay-based subjects, I don't know, like RE, I would also use these phrases there. So for example, this engagingly emphasises, this compellingly conveys, and this successfully suggests. Those 3 phrases I rinsed them so much. And the key thing to remember is one examiner will not mark more than one type of question. So say if I was an examiner, I would be given the requirements of marking question 3. So I'd mark question 3 of one paper and then mark question 3 of the next paper, mark question 3 of another paper. I would not mark the whole of one paper, because that's just how markers work. So say in question 3 you use the phrase compellingly conveys and engagingly emphasises, it's alright, reuse them in question 4, reuse them in question 5, because the same marker's not going to know that you already used that. So in terms of books, so we had Macbeth, A Christmas Carol and An Inspector Calls. What I did was, in year 10, I'm pretty sure I did these essays, right? So poverty, I did an essay about poverty. Then I did an essay about the ghost of Christmas present, and then I did one about Lady Macbeth. You know, I did all these essays at home. I'd take them to my teacher, get my teacher to mark them, and take away the feedback that he'd give me, then adapt, you know? So in year 11, I reflected on my year 10 work, and I realised, you know, when you look back, you realise, oh, this is what I did, and this is what I did wrong, this is what I did well, and I realised how much I used to waffle. So in year 11, I redid the exact same essays that I did in year 10. So this is again poverty, but an enhanced, better version. And then I did the Ghost of Christmas Present, Redemption. I did all of these essays and I take them to my teacher, and you have to remember there's only a certain amount of topics that the exam can ask you, and they do recycle topics sometimes. So if like 5 years ago they did Redemption, maybe it might come up again, you know, but just in a differently worded way. So the more themes you can cover, the better it is. So that's why I think this is a really good way of not only exposing yourself to all the possible themes and all the possible topics that can come up in the exam, but also improving the way you write during the process, you know? Another thing I would strongly recommend you doing is embed your phrases and you embed your quotes into your sentences, rather than just saying something like, the writer uses this quote and this quote shows this. Instead, say something like, towards the end of the novella, we strongly see Scrooge's redemption efforts as he purchases a turkey twice the size of Tiny Tim and decides to send it to the Cratchits. Now, in that sentence, not only did I describe what the characters in the novella did, but I used the exact quotes, right, in speech marks. And that just shows a higher level of understanding of the quotes and a higher level of referencing to the actual title question. I guarantee you will get high marks as long as you do these sorts of high-level technical things, as well as cut out all sorts of waffle, are straight to the point and concise, and are relevant to the question asked in the extract. You know what? If you guys would like to see some of my past essays that I did throughout year 11 and like compared to my old ones? Leave a comment down below because I would love to show you like some parts that I know I did bad and good. On the other hand, if you guys prefer notes being given to you rather than having to write out your own meanings and stuff, and you'd rather be given a specific structure, I really recommend these books. These are from York Notes. And yeah, you're surprised they're not CGP. Well, I personally use these for context and settings, information for those, for each individual book, because these books, what they do is they break down all of the acts and the different chapters of the book. So for Macbeth, you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, etc. They break down those, give them a summary of what each act represents, and they also talk about each characters and the quotes from each characters, and they also talk about language, structure, form, key themes, key context. And for me, I mainly use these books for key themes and key context, made my notes on those, and then I made flashcards on the quotes. So I'd use quotes from these books because what they do is they give you some quotes on this side and then they talk about what they mean. So for example, let's use Fiend Like Queen for Macbeth, for Lady Macbeth. And what this means is Malcolm's final judgment is that Lady Macbeth was like a fiend, a devil in fact. And then that is one interpretation of that quote. So I take one meaning, one analysis from this quote given here, then I type this quote in on Google and I'd see other meanings from Google, and I'd use my favourite analysis from there, and then in class, if we talked about a quote, I'd use my favourite analysis from school. So for one quote, I don't have one analysis, I have 3 separate analyses, right? And like I said before, having one quote but multiple different in-depth analyses is far better than having several quotes with one analysis each. I use flashcards for the book aspects of literature. On my flashcards, what I did was, on one side I'd have the quote, and on the other side I'd have trigger words. For example, Fiend Like Queen, and that one had devil. So I'd have one trigger word being devil. Instead of writing the whole meaning, that trigger word can make me think, okay, this means this, 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 this. And then another trigger word from another analysis being this, 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 this. If you're gonna sit there memorizing, I don't know, 15, 20 quotes, right? In-depth paragraphs, in the exam, under exam conditions and stress and all that, you're likely to forget it. But if you have trigger words instead, you're less likely to forget it, and you're more likely to just, you know, write it in your own words, but you have the basic gist and general idea of what you need to include in that analysis, you know what I mean? Don't jam pack your anthology book and your brain with so many quotes that you cannot remember all of them, because when I did that, I ended up getting a 6 in my first set of marks. Then in my final exam, because I did my notes in this form, I did get a 9. So this is what I really want you guys to take away from this video. Make sure you include themes, language, structure and form, right? Those 4 things are very important, and context. Somehow link it into either your form, either your structure, either your language. If you want to see them like properly, comment down below because I would be more than happy to share my notes with you. But yeah, so that is it for today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a huge thumbs up and smash that subscribe button down below to see me weekly. Anyways, guys, see you next week. Bye.